Hello, and welcome to Itsy Bitsy Book Bits. Today I'm going to read to you from Shaman, from the Talisman series by DeRudder Jackson. Chapter 1. The urgent message intruded in the middle of the night. In Scotland. Renleigh fought to climb out of a dream-filled sleep. As usual, she'd been flying, only this time she wasn't flying alone, the weight she carried heavy and strange. She struggled to return to the present, where someone was clamouring for her attention. "Renleigh, I need you now." Wiping the sleep from her eyes, she sat up and gazed groggily around her dark bedroom. "Party?" she communicated. "It's the middle of the night." "Wake up anyway." She thought she heard a hint of the druid's familiar humour in his voice before his tone changed. "I'm treating a serious casualty in the Highlands. You know the place. Bring your satchel and meet me there." "Now?" Even telepathically, the exasperation in her tone was clear. "I'll explain everything when you arrive." Shaking her head, Renleigh threw off the covers and dragged herself out of bed. Checking her phone, she noted the time was 4:30 a.m., which meant it was 11:30 a.m. in Scotland, and she sighed. She padded to the bathroom and threw some cold water on her face, then went to work taming her riot of auburn hair. The thick tresses always managed to knot while she thrashed her way through sleep. As she worked her brush through the mess, she berated herself, again, for forgetting to braid her hair before going to bed. Dragging on a pair of cargo pants and tugging a hoodie over her long sleeveless silk shift, she wondered what exactly Paddy had gotten himself into this time. A serious casualty, he'd said. With him straddling both the light and the dark sides of the warrior community, the person in question could be a warrior, a druid, or a rogue. Knowing Paddy well enough to guess he'd chosen his words carefully, Renleigh had the idea he'd asked her to help him patch up a rogue, knowing full well the most she'd consent to was to give him herbs and some ideas for healing chants. Unlike her fellow druid, Renleigh had never cultivated an interest in the dark arts. Paddy flirted with them on a far more regular basis than gave her comfort. He also liked to hang with a rough crowd, using his skills to shield a small band of rogues living somewhere in the Swan Valley. Though it went against Renleigh's nature to involve herself in another druid's business, she truly wished he'd given more care to the warriors who kept the community and the civilians they lived among safe. Adhering to the light herself, she concentrated her abilities on aiding the warrior community in whatever capacity necessary, exactly as she'd been trained to do. As she pulled on her boots, a vision of a long-ago rescue of a certain Sheridan warrior flashed through her mind. It had been years since she'd thought of the battle she'd helped Lynette Montgomery Sheridan wage against the Morrigan for the life of her warrior. Chuckling at the memory of Riley Sheridan's cockiness before Morrigan and her evil sisters really went to work making the Sheridans' lives hard, she wondered why the memory had come to her now. After all, it had been 6 years since they'd taken on the witches' rogues and the evil DeRudder in the swamp up the road from her cabin. Those enchanted otter dogs were no match for a multi-talented warrior and a shape-shifting druid who enjoyed her guise as a grizzly bear. For a second, she closed her fingers over her palms, admiring her long, hard nails with a little grin. Closer inspection reminded her she needed to give herself a manicure soon. On a swing through her kitchen, she grabbed a handful of homemade granola and a drink of water. It was hard telling what party was inviting her to, so having something in her stomach before she met him seemed wise. Before she slipped her satchel over her shoulder, she added a couple of changes of clothing to it. He'd emphasized he needed her now, but she decided they'd tempted the cosmos enough with their telepathic conversation. As it stood, she was plenty unnerved about advertising to the goddesses that something was up when she visualized herself to the special place where she and Party had trained together during long ago summers in Scotland. It had been a while since she'd visualized herself anywhere. If she needed to go somewhere quickly, she usually shifted into her sea eagle form and flew, but it seemed the current situation called for her bending time and space to arrive at the cottage deep in the Highlands above a tiny town called Ullapool. Truth be told, she didn't enjoy visualizing herself to places. When she landed, it took her a minute to find her bearings and tamp down the nausea that always came from interfering with the space-time continuum. Travelling halfway across the world in the space of a thought made her doubly nauseous, despite the handful of food she'd swallowed before closing her eyes and visualizing the stone cottage Party had directed her to. Jumping from the pitch darkness of a moonless night to land in the full daylight of late morning further disoriented her, and she cursed her fellow druid under her breath. No one answered her knock, and when she tried the door, it was locked. Though it was early summer, the Highlands struggled to hold on to the sun's heat. She shivered as she contemplated whether to remain on the porch or tempt fate once more by visualizing herself inside. The distant call of an owl suggested the latter, so she closed her eyes and visualized the ancient kitchen. When she opened her eyes, she was standing in the middle of the dimly lit room. From the faint scent of disuse, she surmised the cleaners hadn't been by for a while. "What are you up to now, Partland Kane?" she asked the empty space. "Trying to save a man's life. Get your sweet ass in here, if you please." His voice, coming from somewhere in the back of the house, startled her enough that she left her feet. Glancing around, relief washed over her that no one had seen her jump. It wouldn't do to have such a silly response to a familiar voice in a familiar house damage her badass reputation. The light glowing on the wooden floor of the hallway alerted her to which room Party was in. When she stepped through the door, the druid glanced over his shoulder from where he was working over an inert body lying on the bed, his grin positively devilish. "Startled you, didn't I?" he asked, before returning his attention to his patient. "Jerk," she huffed under her breath. Louder, she asked, "What's the situation?" "This one had a bit of a dust-up. A certain goddess wants his blood. Another goddess wants him to keep breathing." This time, when he shot her a look over his shoulder, his expression was deadly serious. "I answer to the second one." Returning his attention to his patient, he said, "Step around the bed. I need your help to pull his leathers off him." Renleigh did as he bid her, dropping her satchel to the floor on the opposite side of the narrow bed from where Party was working. Judging by the man's blood-stained leather jacket and his shallow breathing, he'd been in more than a dust-up. She slid one hand under his collar as she tugged at the cuff of the sleeve with her other hand. Though he remained completely out, a pained groan seemed to rumble out of the man's soul. Sorry, she whispered. "The only way we're getting this armour off him is if he's sitting up. Help me lift his shoulders," Party said. From the size of the man, he was a warrior. At least, she hoped he was. Knowing Party, that wasn't exactly a given. As she slid her arm beneath the man's shoulders, she was glad she spent long hours in her home gym. The two druids grunted as they worked together to lift the patient. The man's chin rested on his chest as they tugged his leather jacket from his body. Only when it thunked wetly on the rug beside Party did she take note of the long gash across the top of the man's t-shirt, above his heart. So much blood soaked the shirt that she couldn't be sure what colour it had been, or how he had any blood left to pump through his veins. The man had participated in a battle, something serious. "I hope this isn't his favourite," Party said, as he produced a pair of scissors and started cutting away the shirt. As Party worked at removing the man's clothes, A long gash became visible along the top of the man's pecs, but that wasn't the injury that mattered. The deep cut a few inches above his heart should have killed him. That he was continuing to rasp in shallow breaths was a testament to his fortitude, or to a deity's interference. While I clean this up, you make some poultice, please. There's likely some zombie warrior detritus in these wounds, owing to who he and his opponent battled, so plan accordingly. Renleigh blinked at Party's cavalier description. This guy had been battling zombies and men. That could only mean he'd somehow been involved with the Sheridan clan, since it was common knowledge that the war goddesses who had it in for the Sheridans were prone to unleashing armies of rogues and zombie champions from days of old against the preeminent warrior family in modern memory. The idea relaxed her. Whoever their patient was, he was likely a warrior if he battled with the Sheridans. Unless he'd been battling against them. The thought made her blood run cold. Bridget, goddess of healing and Renleigh's patron goddess, wouldn't begrudge her helping Party to save a rogue. But if the man were a rogue, the warrior community wouldn't be as forgiving. As if sensing her swirling thoughts, since she'd re-erected her shield to keep him out of her head after he'd interrupted her sleep, Party gazed at her with a raised brow. At the conclusion of your training, you swore an oath to give, he reminded her. Anyone in the warrior community, she reminded him back. I don't share your ambivalence about where to place my loyalties. You can see how much blood he's lost already. Now is not the time to quibble about who's who or what's what. He chanted over a bowl of water on the nightstand, a healing spell she knew well. Then he dipped a cloth in the water and started cleaning blood away from the man's wounds. When she didn't move, he glanced up from his work with an expectant expression.